The carbon cycle describes the way that carbon moves between the different spheres on Earth. So carbon's quite an important molecule because it has 4 binding sites that can potentially bind to 4 other different types of molecules. And because of this, it's an important atom for creating biological molecules, which is what all living things are made out of. So all proteins, carbohydrates, fats are all made out of, they're all hydrocarbons, and they all have carbon as the backbone of their molecules. So it's quite an interesting exercise to go through as to how carbon moves around the different spheres of Earth and is made constantly available in fresh forms to support biological life. And that's the important point with the recycling of matter, is that it's always made available in a fresh form so that living things can incorporate those molecules into their bodies to support them in their functions they carry out. So maybe the best place to start is from the sun, and the ability of plants through photosynthesis to use that sunlight to convert the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere with water that they absorb from their roots. So they use that carbon dioxide, they draw out water from their roots, and then they use the power of sunlight to fuse those molecules together to make a bigger molecule, which is sugar. And then those sugars can be fed through their roots to the soil biology. So it's a food source for the soil biology, and that soil biology in return provides nutrients and minerals to the plants. So it's a mutually beneficial exchange between the soil organisms and the plants. Or the plants will incorporate them into their tissues, so their leaves, their trunks, their branches, and grazers can come along and eat those tissues. And therefore the carbon that the plants have used to make their own tissues will then be passed on to the grazers and be used to make their tissues. So all their proteins and fats and carbohydrates were made from the plants through photosynthesis. And then other living things in the food chain will then eat the grazers, and the carbon will pass through the food chain to the rest of the living things that are in that food web of that particular ecosystem. And then there's some more ways in which carbon can get down into the soil. So if you remember, the soil is the lithosphere. So we're getting a movement of carbon from the plants and the animals, which is the biosphere, down into the lithosphere. And it does that through the plants releasing exudates into the soil, or the plants dropping leaf litter, and that leaf litter being decomposed and being returned as an organic matter to the soil, or the animals dying or producing manures, and again the decomposers bringing the carbon from dead animals or manures down into the soil. And then there's a long-term storage of that carbon that's also possible. So that carbon that's in the soil over hundreds of thousands of years, and if there's sufficient compression, can be changed into coal, oil and gas. But the important thing for agricultural production is that the more carbon you can get into the soil, the more productive that soil becomes, and the better habitat that soil provides for living things. So the decomposition of leaf litter and animals and manures is an important food source for the living things that are in that soil, as well as the sugars or the exudates that the plants put into the soil. So they're the food source to the many thousands of different soil organisms. And the presence of carbon in the soil not only feeds the soil organisms, but helps to regulate the environment as well. So it helps to hold on to water, it helps to form humus, and it forms soil aggregates as well. So the ability of carbon to get into the soil helps make that soil more productive and support a more diverse soil ecology. So that's a link between the biosphere and the lithosphere. And then there's also a link between the atmosphere and the hydrosphere. So if you've got an ocean here, and you've got the atmosphere. There is an exchange of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere by diffusion. So diffusion is just when things dissolve into something. So that carbon dioxide can dissolve into any water at all, and the ocean acts as a great sink of that carbon dioxide. So there's a lot of concern with global warming at the moment due to the stores of coal, oil and gas being burned and all that carbon being put into the atmosphere. So that will increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And one of the big regulators of that amount of carbon dioxide is a lot of carbon being dissolved into the water. But there's also an impact to that, which is ocean acidification. So the more carbon dioxide is absorbed into the ocean, the more acid it becomes, and that creates a whole downstream impact to the living things that are in the ocean, because they don't like acidic conditions, and particularly shellfish and crustaceans, their shells are dissolved by an acid, by the acidity of the ocean. So the more acid the water becomes, the more impacted living things are, particularly shellfish and coral reefs and crustaceans. There's also a link between the biosphere and the atmosphere. So when plants and animals break food that they eat and release the energy that's in that food, that process is called respiration. So it's not breathing, but it's cells in your body using sugars and breaking those sugars down to release energy, and that's what respiration is. And as a byproduct of that, you get carbon dioxide being released back into the atmosphere. So all animals do it. We breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants also breathe out carbon dioxide, and they do that because it's a waste product that we produce as a consequence of breaking down our food to release the energy that's in it. So that's another source of carbon dioxide going from the biosphere back into the atmosphere. So you can see how the carbon's moving around all these different systems. And as far as the productivity of agricultural systems go, that's particularly this part here. It's where the leaf litter and manures and the exudates from plants provides a source of carbon to feed the soil. And what we're really trying to do is increase the health and abundance and diversity of the soil ecosystem, because the health of that system is going to support the productivity of our agricultural system. So we're really trying to set up an agricultural system that really looks after the health of our soil and improves it over time, so that our agricultural production will be able to be increased over time, and we'll get more profit off that land because it's all being derived from a healthy soil ecology that's also more stable.